In the burning sands of northern Africa, beneath a hot desert sun, a powerful kingdom thrived for thousands of years. Strong kings and queens built massive temples and buried their dead in pyramid-shaped tombs. But this is not Egypt, and the people who made these monuments were not ancient Egyptians. This is the Sudan, the largest country in Africa and the birthplace of Nubia, a golden kingdom nourished by the Nile.
At that time, it was the largest country of the whole world. It was an empire, a real empire.
An empire with a language that scholars still can't read. Lost in the shadows, the history of ancient Nubia has remained a mystery until now.
You have the chance to find something for the first time. We're writing the history books right now from the antiquities of this country.
From the ground comes evidence of sacred rituals. An ancient crime scene.
It looks as if someone has deliberately come and smashed this altar into many, many pieces.
And a ruthless invasion that may have brought down the powerful empire. Turning detective, these archaeologists will use the tools of their trade to piece together the final days of a lost city and bring to life a forgotten kingdom, a land called Nubia. Ancient Nubia began to emerge as a powerful state in what is now Sudan around 2000 BC. Not long after the first Egyptian dynasties had forged their own nation farther to the north. From the beginning, Nubian rulers and their formidable armies of skilled archers were perceived by the Egyptians as a force to be reckoned with and a dangerous competitor for control of the southern reaches of the Nile. For many years, Egyptian pharaohs held sway over their southern adversaries. But there came a time when the Nubians turned the tables and conquered Egypt. Rivals at war, partners in trade, the history of these two nations would be intertwined for millennia. Today, it's the Egyptians who bask in the limelight, but the story of one of their greatest rivals is beginning to emerge from the shadows. The Nubians were African, sophisticated and artistic. They flourished independently of Egypt for thousands of years. Rich veins of gold brought Nubian rulers great wealth. Artists excelled at fashioning the precious metal into jewelry to adorn their royal patrons. Ceramics produced by Nubian potters were considered some of the finest in the ancient world. Nubian architects not only built temples to a unique pantheon of gods, they also revitalized Egyptian traditions. Today, Sudan has nearly 3 times as many pyramids as Egypt.
When I think about all those powerful kings who ruled over the Sudan, I like very much that those people would have been my ancestors. Always I feel I am part of them.
In the 1920s, Harvard archaeologist George Reisner excavated Nubia's magnificent tombs and laid the foundation for a chronology of kings and queens that spans more than 1,000 years. We have their names, but many of their stories are still lost in the cryptic code of the Nubian script. To decipher the language, archaeologists dream of finding a new Rosetta Stone, like the one used to translate Egyptian hieroglyphs in 1822.
That would be absolutely fantastic if we were to find such a document. It's a scholar's dream to find a clue to solve a puzzle like this.
Now a remarkable new site. A lost city in the sand may hold the key to unlocking Nubia's past. Archaeologists Julie Anderson and Salah Ahmed must travel 220 miles north of Khartoum. It takes 9 dust-choked hours to reach their destination, the modern village of Dangail. The site lies hidden beneath mysterious mounds of sand near the center of town. It's a well-preserved Nubian city, 2,000 years old, and some 24 football fields in size. European explorers passed through this remote corner of northern Sudan in the 1800s. They left record of red brick rubble-strewn mounds. But it wasn't until Julie and Salah explored the site 3 years ago that the existence of an ancient city was finally confirmed.
We started digging, and in the first 20 minutes, we found what looked like a floor, and we started clearing it off, and then we found the edges, and we realized it was a huge wall we were standing on. It wasn't a floor at all. It was quite a shock. We suddenly began to understand that the site was absolutely huge, much, much larger than we had ever anticipated.
Unearthing the city will take many years, a huge workforce, and the hefting of countless buckets of sand. But already, an impressive structure is coming to light. Beneath one of the central mounds, the team has found the remains of one of the largest temples in the Sudan. Julie and Salah don't know exactly when it was built, but they believe it is dedicated to the supreme god worshipped by both Nubians and Egyptians, the ram-headed Amun. Temples to this king of gods have a classic shape, based on the one built by the Egyptians at Karnak, and the layout of Dangail seems to follow suit. After several months of hard labor, the workmen have moved over 1 million pounds of sand and exposed one of the finest paved courtyards Salah has ever seen.
I'm actually sitting on the floor of the second courtyard of the Temple of Dangail, and as you see, it is a very beautiful floor, beautifully done, carved in sandstone tiles. The joints between the tiles are very narrow and they are really very compact. It looks fresh, as if it has never been used.
In another part of the temple, Julie has unearthed the remains of a large sandstone column. Buried for centuries, carved figures have been protected from the abrasive power of wind and sand.
He's beautiful. Got a little belly button.
This is really beautiful.
Yeah.
Very well preserved.
Oh, look, he's wearing a little kilt. And he's got a little fat tummy, which is kind of nice. And he's got the water jars. One is here and the other one's here. And they're actually pouring water. They're pouring libations, offerings to the god. Let's clean him off a little bit better there.
In this extreme climate, it's no surprise to find depictions of water offerings in the temple.
Water is life. In the heat, particularly in the summer here, when it can be 50 degrees Celsius, water is an absolutely welcome offering.
Along with the water-bearing god Happy, the sandstone column is inscribed with the Nubians' mysterious text.
The seated man. This is the letter A, and he's got his head here. He's got an arm down, an arm upraised, and he's sort of crouching. And we know he sounds like ah. Unfortunately, while we know he starts a lot of words, and we know what he sounds like, we have no idea what these words mean.
The Nubians devised their new alphabet around 200 BC, when the kingdom was based in the city of Meroe. As part of a cultural renaissance, the Meroites, as they are known, replaced Egyptian hieroglyphs with their own written language. Until it is deciphered, scholars can only read what other cultures of the time wrote about the kingdom.
We do have some records about the Meroitic kingdom from outside sources. There's Greek historians who have written about the kingdom of Meroe, and they had contact with the Roman Empire and, of course, Egypt. But we don't have the Meroites' point of view. If you can read the script, it's the actual people that are talking to you. They're talking to you about themselves. What we really need to find is something akin to the Rosetta Stone that was found in Egypt that helped to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphs. We need a bilingual text.
The ancient city at Dangail is a likely candidate for having a Rosetta Stone. Its position on the Nile just south of an area of rapids called the Fifth Cataract ensured a strategic position at the hub of major trade routes to the African interior.
The Fifth Cataract is rocky and you can't sail through there. The rocks are so sharp they'll cut the bottom out of your boat. You have to actually leave the water, go by land, and then rejoin the Nile. And you rejoin the Nile in the area of Dangail.
Throughout its history, the Nubian kingdom lured traders from afar who coveted goods like ivory, animal skins, and of course, gold. People of many different cultures and languages, Greeks, Egyptians, and Romans, all traded with Nubia. Many would have passed through Dangail and may have left a bilingual inscription. But for now, the only avenue to the Nubians' past lies underground.
Here, you have to dig, you have to be dirty, you have to bring things out to the sand, to study them, to draw them, and to make your analysis out of that.
The North African weather doesn't always cooperate. 3 weeks into the dig, a swirling cloud on the horizon means a tough job is about to get a lot tougher. The following morning, skies are clear, and with the calm after the storm comes their first clue to the origins of the ancient city.
That's great. Salah.
Yes. A cartouche.
Only royalty was allowed the privilege of encircling their name with the symbolic oval shape called a cartouche. The form of a rope tied together at the end was thought to protect the imperial name from harm.
And that's what we have here. We have the bottom of the oval, and this is one of the letters. Of course, a king's name has many letters, so we just have one tiny clue here.
If we found the name of the king in the sanctuary, that means this is the man who built the temple.
This is a very, very important piece. Now we need to try and find the rest of the name, and hopefully it'll be here somewhere, because this piece obviously came off of something.
Though Julie and Salah don't know exactly who built the Amun temple at Dangail, they suspect it dates back some 2,000 years to the Meroitic period. This was Nubia's golden age, when the great kings ruled from Meroe and were buried in the royal cemetery in tombs with a familiar form. Influenced by their proximity to Egypt, the Nubians admired the massive tombs at Giza and began burying their royalty in pyramids of their own. They adapted the shape, favoring a much steeper-sided pyramid. Adjoining offering chapels were richly carved with scenes representing the comfortable afterlife of the king, attended by his many servants. Not only kings are buried in the pyramids of Meroe. After the 3rd century BC, a series of strong queens occupied the throne and may have been co-regents. One of the most powerful ruled near the time of Christ, just before the Temple of Dan Gale was probably constructed.
Amani Sheketo is a really powerful Nubian queen. She's carrying bows and arrows. These are traditionally the accoutrements of a man. She's got prisoners tied up. There's a good possibility that she actually fought off the Romans.
In 23 BC, Roman soldiers attacked the Nubian kingdom. According to their accounts, the Nubian resistance was led by a valiant woman, blind in one eye, who scholars believe may be Amani Sheketo. The queen successfully stopped the Romans from overtaking her kingdom and even brokered a favorable peace treaty. Though faint, traces of Amani Sheketo's imposing figure can still be seen on the walls of her offering chapel.
She's a larger woman, so it shows how powerful she is. It's also part of the Meroitic impression of beauty. She's well-fed. She's wearing a lot of bracelets on her arms, rings on her fingers. She would have been covered in gold. She was a very lucky lady to have a lot of this jewelry.
Amani Sheketo's royal cache first came to light in 1834, when an Italian explorer, Giuseppe Ferlini, traveled to the Sudan, eager, as he claimed, to make some useful contribution to history. In fact, he was really searching for gold. Ferlini hoped to make a fortune selling antiquities back in Europe. His greed led him to the pyramid fields of Meroe. According to his diary, Ferlini directed his workmen to dismantle Amani Sheketo's tomb at nearly 100 feet high, one of the best preserved in the cemetery. While his men labored under the punishing rays of the desert sun, Ferlini took it easy in the shade. The excitement began when a faithful servant summoned him from the top of the pyramid.
I got up and raced over, my heart filled with hopes of some delightful adventure.
At the summit, Ferlini reported that his men had discovered a chamber hidden beneath the stones. From within emerged a bronze bowl filled with objects wrapped in cloths of linen. Ferlini had hit the jackpot.
As it became evening, I brought the discovered objects to my tent, and after all the servants had given over to sleep, I pulled out the precious objects and studied them with my soul filled with joy. I admired the gold, and on seeing the quantity of it, I realized it had to exceed greatly all that which I knew was spread through the museums of Europe.
Ferlini had discovered a dazzling hoard of jewels. Today, much of this cache is housed in Munich's Egyptian Museum. Gold bracelets covered with decorative bands of fused glass. Ornamental pendants bearing images of the gods. And dozens of heavy gold rings, some incised with the figure of Amun.
This is one of the greatest treasures ever found in Nubia. It gives us a very good idea of what the kings and the queens would have been wearing at the time.
Though Ferlini's raid did bring the incredible cache to light, a price was paid for the discovery. The explorers' ruthless quest for gold destroyed Amanishaketo's pyramid. In the outer courtyard of the Amun temple at Dangale, another story of destruction may be unfolding. These ruins, too, may be the product of something more than just the ravages of time.
This temple seems to have been abandoned for some reason, and we're not quite sure why.
From beneath the ground comes evidence of a catastrophic moment in Dangale's history.
It's part of a roof beam. It's a long piece of palm wood, but it's been incredibly badly burned. You can see this is charcoal, and you can see actually little bits of the palm beam breaking up as it's disintegrating. We're actually finding the real part of the roof beam that fell in after a big, big fire in this forecourt. It must have been a terrible, terrible fire because the burning is so extensive. And you can see traces of this fire on the columns, on the floor, and we actually have a piece of it preserved. Finding an extensive layer of burning does give us a good clue as to why people left the area. Maybe it was a big war, maybe the temple accidentally caught fire.
However it started, the fire must have been fierce enough to cause the evacuation of the temple, and maybe the entire city. But what may have been a disaster for the Merowites has proved For the young Sala growing up at the foot of the sacred mountain, Jebel Barkal and the ruins around it were a constant presence.
I like this mountain when I was a child. I used to come here every Friday, and it was fun for me and my friends. At the same time, for me, these ruins were a mystery. I was very curious to know what was it about, the mystery of the mountain.
The mystery dates back 3,500 years to some of the greatest pharaohs of Egypt, Nubia's northern rival. In the shape of Jebel Barkal's pinnacle, they saw the most powerful sign of kingship, the cobra, or Uraeus.
You will see really the silhouette of a crown with the symbol of kingship on front of this crown.
Since it was Amun, the god of gods, who granted kingship, the Egyptians built a temple here in his honor. Expanded over the years by Nubian kings, the temple is the largest in the Sudan, but time has taken its toll. Carved columns like those Julie and Salah have uncovered at Dan Gale no longer exist, worn away by centuries of exposure.
Weather conditions are very harsh, so now the temple and the whole site is really in ruins.
But when the temple shone like a jewel at the base of the sacred mountain, the mighty Egyptian pharaohs would have traveled hundreds of miles to be crowned here by the high priests of Amun.
This was the holiest place in the Nile Valley. They were thinking from long away that Amun was dwelling here.
Inside the base of the pinnacle lies a temple to the goddess Mut, wife of the god Amun. Salah can read the mythology of the mountain carved on the temple walls.
You can see clearly the silhouette of the mountain. A high outcrop with a flat top, like that. And in front, you can see the snake and the sun disk, which is a symbol of kingship. And inside the mountain, we can see Amun seated on his throne. This was the ancient belief that Amun was dwelling inside the mountain of Jebel Barkal.
In the 8th century BC, the once powerful Egypt had grown weak and lost its hold on the sacred mountain. The Nubians assumed control of Jebel Barkal, calling themselves the true sons of Amun, and eventually became so powerful they marched on Egypt. They conquered their northern rival and founded the 25th dynasty.
Everybody thinks that the Egyptians were the masters of the Nile Valley, but it was not the case all the time. For a period of more than 100 years, the Nubians were the masters of Africa.
King Taharko was the most prominent in this powerful lineage of Nubian pharaohs who came to rule over the land of the pyramids. Their kingdom now incorporated all the wealth and splendor that had defined the Egyptian civilization. For almost a century, the Nubians controlled a territory that today would stretch from Khartoum all the way to Palestine.
Maybe at that time it was the largest country of the whole world. It was an empire, a real empire.
Though the Nubians ultimately lost control of Egypt to an invasion of Assyrians, this didn't put an end to their kingdom or their loyalty to the great god Amun. They regrouped in the south and would flourish for another 1,000 years, building temples to the god of gods all over their realm. It is Salah's mission to restore the legacy of his ancestors.
Now it is part of my life to go out of home to excavate. I have to dig something. I have to discover something for the history of Sudan.
Back at Dan Gale, Salah has returned to the temple and a new challenge. He'll be searching for his ancestors in their graves. On the edge of town, within a stone's throw of Dan Gale's modern cemetery, workers on an irrigation project have uncovered an ancient burial ground.
So the machine which has dug the canal just came across the graves. This is bad, yeah. Destroyed at least 9 or 10 graves. But on the other hand, it was the reason after the discovery of the cemetery. So it is bad and good.
Salah believes that the people buried in this cemetery are the very ones who worshipped in the temple.
So it is really fantastic to have the life and the dead at the same time. So you can complete the story of a whole population.
At the temple, Julie and the excavation team continue the battle against heat and sandstorms, hoping to unlock more of the mystery of the Amun temple. The removal of another 3 feet of fill reveals more of the sandstone columns and a now familiar figure. The Nile god the ancient Nubians called Happy. The water bearer is making multiple appearances in the inner courtyard.
On this column we have 8 figures of Happy, and on all of the other columns we have 8 figures. So by the time we're done, we're going to have drawn 32 Happy figures. Happy is the god of the Nile, and he's carrying jars that are pouring water. He brings the fertility of the Nile to the people who live along its banks. That's why Happy's so important to the people who lived here. Without the Nile and the river and the water, they'd die.
Water was so important to the ancient Nubians that it played a central role in the daily life of this temple.
The priests would have offered libations to the gods. Particularly here it would have been the god Amun. So this would involve pouring water or possibly milk on the altar and giving it to the god.
The priests of Amun would have carried out this ritual in the most sacred part of the temple, the innermost sanctuary.
Normally only the priests would have entered this room. It's the main sanctuary, the Holy of Holies.
Julie and Salah have been waiting to excavate this sacred chamber. They expect to find an altar or statue here, something to correlate with the ancient rituals they know took place deep inside the temple.
These are huge blocks. You can see they're larger than my hand in thickness. They held something really, really heavy here. It could be an altar, it could be a statue.
This is where the priests would have made their offerings to Amun. But where the altar should stand, there is now disturbing evidence of desecration.
Well, it looks like somebody dug a huge hole in the floor of the main sanctuary of the temple.
The sacred shrine is missing.
Either they took it with them or they pushed it over and took it somewhere else and maybe smashed it. So in terms of committing sacrilege, this is a terrible, terrible offense.
With evidence of foul play mounting, the fire discovered earlier in the forecourt is beginning to look like no accident. The identity of the marauders is a mystery, but what they did with the altar soon becomes perfectly clear when Julie re-examines a heap of stone fragments excavated earlier in the season.
Oof, and this is kind of heavy. This is the top corner of an altar. It's also, as I said, quite heavy, so it took a lot of muscle to break this piece into the numerous pieces that you see here.
Luckily, though the altar was destroyed, a crucial piece remains intact.
We turned up this piece.
It's the missing part of the cartouche Julie and Salah have been searching for. Now they can decipher the name of the ruler who built this temple, and is not a king.
The royal name is Marie Ka Ra, and that's one of the names of Queen Amanitori.
The temple is no longer anonymous. Now it has a ruler and an age. Amanitori is another powerful Nubian queen who ruled during the 1st century AD.
We actually know what the queen looked like. This is her crown right here. The crown, the front of the crown has a double uraeus. That's 2 snakes with a little sun disk at the top of each head. And then this is her nose coming down in her profile. And she has an ear and a little earring right on this side. And she's got a big chubby cheek here. Her weight signifies that she has beauty, fertility, she has enough to eat, and she can produce children.
Queen Amanitori and her co-regent King Natakamani reigned over Nubia during the time of Christ. Together, this powerful couple honored the gods by building more temples than almost any other Nubian rulers. The complex at the site of Naga, 125 miles to the south, is an impressive testament to their devotion. An avenue of ram statues leading up to the temple pays homage to Amun and hints at what the sands of Dan Gale may still be hiding. Like all Nubian rulers, King Natakamani and Queen Amanitori would have been officially crowned first at Jebel Barkal. From there, they would have visited many of the most important temples in their kingdom, like Dan Gale, to be crowned ceremonially by Amun.
Amanitori and Natakamani approached the temple, Dan Gale, by boat, sailing up the Nile. And then they would have headed towards the main sanctuary.
The Amun temple complex would have appeared like a mirage on the horizon.
And then as you approached the temple, there would have been 2 massive doors blocking your entrance, hiding the secrets inside.
Led by the high priests, Queen Amanitori and King Natakamani would enter the temple, followed by their courtiers, and proceed to the inner sanctuary.
They would lift incense up, and so the place would be smoky and smelling of frankincense. They would have made offerings to the god Amun. And then the priests of Amun, speaking for the god Amun, would have indicated who the successor, who the next king was going to be. And then the crowning would take place. The king is officially crowned by Amun. So presumably that would be by his representative, the high priest of Amun.
Though access to the inner sanctuaries was restricted to priests and royalty, other parts of the temple were open to pilgrims from more humble backgrounds.
We found a footprint inscribed in the paving stones of the first court. It's graffiti that's been left by a pilgrim who came to visit the temple. This would show the god and other pilgrims that this person had come to visit the temple. It's a very human thing. It's something that somebody actually came and did as an act of personal piety, as an act of faith.
With the discovery of the nearby cemetery, Julie and Salah have an even more direct link to the past. Inside these ancient graves, they may actually come face to face with the very people who worshipped in the temple nearly 2,000 years ago. Salah begins the excavation of a new tomb, untouched by the drainage canal.
By simple brushing like this, I can discover or notice any ancient activity on this surface. But here I have to be very careful because I have to follow exactly the limits of the original shaft.
After several days of digging, Salah is now well into the burial shaft. At the entrance of the tomb, he has found a perfectly intact pot within the fill.
But it is a beautiful one. I like it. I like very much the form. See, the form is really very beautiful. The color is also very nice. I think it is a very beautiful museum piece. Huh?
The pot probably held incense, burned as a ritual by the family of the deceased. As a final sign of grief, vessels like this one were placed upside down just outside the grave. The shaft would be sealed for what the Merowites believed would be eternity. Families may have looked for solace in the temple, praying for the sick, mourning the dead. Others may have come to thank the gods for a new birth or a bountiful harvest. Those who wished to enter the temple complex passed first through a towering pylon gateway. Halfway down a paved avenue lined with rams, they would have enjoyed a brief respite from the sun beneath a shady kiosk. Ahead lay the great wooden doors of the temple.
The whole temple would have been painted. The columns would have been painted. The walls would have been painted. There would be color everywhere.
The base of the walls and columns in the outer sanctuary were encircled with figures of water-bearing happy gods, while images of the king and queen making offerings to Amun adorned the upper reaches of the chamber. Even statues of the gods would have been enlivened by color. Each day, the priests of Amun would attend to his countenance, applying a rim of black coal to enhance the ram's red-painted eyes. So far, the team has found no trace of these Amun statues they know should be somewhere inside the temple complex. But what they find in a new trench outside the main doorway leads Julie to believe the missing figures could have suffered the same fate as the altar from the inner sanctuary.
We have large clumps of broken, shattered statue here, but the statues had been smashed into many, many pieces. There's literally thousands and thousands of fragments here, many of which are completely undistinguishable.
After hours of digging, finally, a piece they recognize.
Mungkin بدم شوية. Oh.
It's the red-painted eye of a ram.
Finn. Finn. Hi. The eyes of the ram did look like this, so this does tell us that they were ram statues. And we were looking specifically for rams because that is the animal of the god Amun.
Unlike the ram statues at the Amun temple at Naga, which are still intact after all these years, their counterparts at Dangale have suffered a much harsher fate.
It looks like people basically went down the avenue purposefully, step by step, and went to each statue, pushed it over, smashed it, and then moved on to the next one.
Hard work. But the perpetrators didn't show up empty-handed.
Right within the temple, at the scene of the crime, we found this. And I had no idea what it was at first. It's burned on one side. It's a very heavy rock, and it fits nicely in my hand. And then we started looking at it a little bit more and realized that the striking surface is right here. It's a hammerstone. So we had this hypothesis that a rock such as this could have been easily used to break these pieces, the ram and the altar, into many, many small pieces.
With a similar tool, not an artifact, Julie will put her theory to the test on a large chunk of sandstone.
This is a type of sandstone that's like that used in the rams in front of the temple. So let's pretend that this is a ram that I've just pushed over. The pieces of rock are fragmenting into very sharp, small pieces. They look very similar to the pieces that we're getting from the altar. I'm pretty happy with this demonstration, in fact. It looks very much like these stone tools could have done the job. We have a crime on our hands here.
It all adds up to an invasion. Ruthless and determined, some powerful force swept through Dangale and laid waste to the sacred temple. The invaders ransacked the sanctuary, obliterated reference to the Nubian rulers, and destroyed the symbols of their gods. They looted everything of value. And then, as a final gesture, burned the temple to the ground. Had they come to overthrow the Nubian Empire? The Meroites had formidable enemies at the end of their reign, raiding nomads from the desert and a rival kingdom in what is now Ethiopia. The decline of the Nubian kingdom in the 3rd century AD may have prompted the attack at Dangale. One thing is sure, the ancient city never recovered from the blow. Once it was destroyed, the people of Dangale abandoned the temple and their homes.
We've managed to find these answers, and that's really exciting. Now we're looking for some of the details, but we have the answers to the big questions. And that's incredible.
It's a tremendous payoff for their first seasons of excavation. But Salah is still hard at work in the cemetery. He has finally reached the inside of the tomb. A massive offering pot is found within.
But it is very, very beautiful. I like very much the form of these ceramics. These are used for liquids. They are found normally at the entrance of the graves, protecting the dead. Here in the grave, it is really a moment of history. You have a complete moment of history sealed in this grave. It is very exciting to go to the bones to find the body complete and in situ. But at the same time, you are treating a human body, a human being. He was doing agriculture or herding animals. They were depending completely maybe on the Nile, living as we are doing today, the same activities, I think.
These were the worshippers of the Amun Temple of Dangale. those who suffered the greatest loss when their city was ransacked.
So it is really very interesting for an archaeologist to find both, to find the life and the afterlife. And you can really tell a whole story of the people. How do they live? How did they die?
But the story is still unfolding.
There's an awful lot of work to be done at Dangale. There are mounds and mounds and buildings that are obviously well preserved here. Sala and I could be here for 20, 30 years easily, and still not even scratch the surface of the entire site.
Waiting somewhere beneath the sands may still be the coveted Rosetta Stone, the secret to deciphering the Nubians' mysterious script. And many of the structures in the massive city of Dangale are still hidden.
It is a work of a whole generation, I think. So what we can do, we can just do a part of it, and maybe our sons will do the rest to complete the story.